Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Standard Open in Baltimore, part of the SCG Tour. I'm Nick Miller alongside Shaheen, Soorani, the Esper Professor. You all know and love, and he's bringing what you expect.
I actually had ramp sleeved up for this event.
No, you didn't.
You're right.
I'm calling you on it right now.
I actually do like ramp in this format, but you can't play the first event without playing what the people want to see, right? The people and myself. All of us want to see. So the big concern of this deck was the mana, and I'm happy to report mana's good.
Article went up on Star City Games this week talking about the deck. Obviously, you've been working on it, tuning it for a while. Anyone that follows you on Twitter knows you've been kind of toying with it. Epiphany at the Drown Yard, unfortunately, got the axe. But you got some other, Shadows over Innistrad cards in this deck, and it looks to be in full force here. I know you got Joe Lissette playing the deck as well.
Yeah, actually, I'm surprised that he didn't tell me. There's a whole bunch of Star City guys that play it, even just people have been running into that are playing the 75. I played the mirror round too, so there's definitely the same. They got the same results in testing that I got, where the mana is coming to play untapped, and it was one of those where, for the first time I even write the article, I say this is a beta version. I just threw a dart on a dartboard with the mana. I'm just like, please work, and I was expecting tap land, tap land, tap land, but it turns out that if you're playing a shard that has 8 of the battle lands, your land's coming to play untapped more often than not. So this is a great choice for control. I think it's a little better than Grixis, but Grixis is a close second, just because the mana's so good.
Now, how is the fix? What do you do to the mana base to make it to where it works?
All right, so there's a few things you have to do, and you have to accept the fact you're going to be playing Evolving Wilds. Evolving Wilds is a card that I have never played in Constructed Magic ever, in the history or Terramorphic Expanse in Constructed Magic ever. So now the day has come where even I have to play it. If you want to play Control, there's 3 colors you have to play it, because basically it's just a bad fetch land from before, but at least it turns on your battle lands. So even though it's not a fetch land per se, it at least gets all 3 colors, unlike the fetch lands do for basics, so you're allowed to have them come and play tapped. The big trick of this deck is not to play too many of the new lands. You want to play 4 total, because they're not as good as the battle lands. The battle lands can be triggered. They either trigger the new land or they're triggered by basics. So at least you have a lot of leeway, where the new lands, the shadow lands, they need a lot of help to be untapped.
That's what I've been hearing from people trying to build the 3-color decks is the Shadowlands don't work with Evolving Wilds, and you need Evolving Wilds to make the Battlelands work.
Absolutely.
So you kind of have to cut on the Shadowlands to make the rest of the mana work.
Absolutely, and that says something. And again, you realize that people realize that I am kind of medium at mana base building. So this time I just hit the lottery. We added 1 swamp to the deck, and then the deck has been firing on all cylinders. So Joe Lissette was 4-0. Ollie was undefeated when I ran into him last round. I don't know how he did this round. The deck's just doing a lot better than I thought it was mana-wise.
Right. Of course, you're 3-1 so far, right? Or 4-1.
4-1.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Round 5 here, 4-1.
Yes, sir.
Let's go over the deck here. We got the usual suspects you expect to see in the Dragons deck. You, of course, have Ojutai, Silumgar Scorn, and, of course, Foul-Tongue Invocation. The Dragon Matters cards are all here. Jace, that ain't going anywhere.
Nope, it's just the best card in the deck. It's even better now. Removal is on the light side. Everyone's all about that Declaration of Stone, which is when it's cast against me, I won 2 games based because I had Declaration of Stone. You can't give a control player cantrips. You can't give a control player card draw to hit land drops, because that's all they need. Because you see the power level of all these big cards, and Jace is now either getting Declarationed, maybe a Silk Wrap here and there, but there's not a whole lot that kills it on turn 2.
Right, very interesting point. The big card out of Shadows over Innistrad, when you look at 2 drops or removal spells, is Declaration in Stone, and that's a card against a lot of decks where you don't mind giving them the clue, because you're trying to beat down or you're going to turn the corner very quickly.
Yes.
You're playing a deck that says, well, I'm fine with you giving me more cards.
Oh yeah.
So it does look pretty poor coming up against something like Esper Dragons.
Oh yeah, and there's definitely 2 camps. The camp where all the professionals are than me, and there's probably like 3 or 4 people that agree. And I think Declaration of Stone, like you said, is fantastic in an aggressive deck with a clock. In any other deck, I think it's horrible. I think it's a card that you cannot afford. In a mid-range clash, you can't afford to give them cards. In a control clash, you can't afford to give them cards. Even in something that's still like a ramp style thing, you can't give them cards. You Declaration their World Breaker, and they already sacked their Sanctum Move and got another one. Now they're going to draw another card. They hit the Chandra off the cantrip. It's a disaster sometimes. It's just, they played Elvish Visionary just to cantrip.
Yeah.
And now, you're still going to keep it in against them because it's effective, but it's still not the best option for a lot of these decks. I think Stasis Snare is a little bit better.
Right.
But we're avoiding that now in this deck. We got better removal in the Esper colors.
Right, of course, you've got Grasp of Darkness here. We got the new one, Anguished Unmaking.
Yep.
Talk about this card, because a lot of discussion has been based around, is the 3 life worth what this card does?
I think it is worse than Underend. I think that Phyrexian mana is obviously very good, and this is we kind of joked about it being Phyrexian and a half. That's what it is. It's 3 mana, and it does the same thing pretty much. You need it. Planeswalkers are fantastic in the new format. Every deck has Planeswalkers in it. The ramp decks have Planeswalkers. The control decks, the aggro decks have a ton of Planeswalkers. To not play this card is very, very ambitious if you think you're going to win a lot of games against Planeswalkers without having this card. And it's either that or Ruinous Path, and this card obviously is an instant. It's just better, and you just have to suck up the 3 life and just hope you can offshoot it with Foul Tongue, with Dragon Lords, or excuse me, with Oshai's Command and with Shambling Vents.
Okay. Did you think about going towards something like To the Slaughter? Because, you mentioned Ruinous Path, and you have one in your sideboard, but there's ways to deal with more Planeswalkers.
I think To the Slaughter is actually good, and I just don't have Delirium abilities. There's a lot of decks like that play, if you have Oath of Mist in your deck, if you have Hangerback Walker main, some Artifacts main. With my deck, I don't have any enchantments. I don't want to play Deadweight, a card like that, because in this format, I don't know how good -2/-2 is yet. It needs to be a lot better than I predicted. But if you're playing an Esper deck that has at least a couple enchantments or artifacts, I think it's a fine card. Otherwise, you really need to have an Evolving Wilds, really need to have a Jace. Remember, you're only playing 10 creatures, so you have very few creatures in this deck, so Delirium's a little bit tougher in this version.
Very good point. You don't quite have the Delirium enablers in this deck to really turn that card on.
Right.
But if you're worried about the life loss,
Yeah, there's definitely an option, and you can play Deadweight. You can build a control deck with Deadweight or some Hangerback Walker, some kind of artifacts in there, and then the card's fantastic if you get Delirium off. This one we just kind of have to just knuckle up and just pray that we can just avoid the 3 loss costing us the game.
Yeah. Languish, this card's coming in full force now post-rotation. A lot of people are packing a bunch of copies of that as a sweeper du jour.
4 copies.
Ojutai's Command here is great, of course. We've seen this card popping up a lot. Painful Truths as well. So you're losing a lot of life in this deck, drawing cards and killing creatures.
Yep, and you have to just keep offsetting the life loss. But luckily, 7 out of 10 decks, 7, 8 out of 10 decks, you can actually eat a lot of life loss and you're just fine. The black-white deck, which is popular, the ramp decks, the mid-range decks, even the Collected Company decks, they don't do a lot on turns 1, 2, and it starts on turn 3. If you're playing against a deck that starts being aggressive on 3, then the life loss really starts to stack up. Otherwise, you don't care. It's just like the old Jeskai Black decks, like Kunio was playing. He played 4 Painful Truths, didn't even lose. He top 8 at a Grand Prix pretty easily. It's because you have to run into the deck that punishes you for it. And after rotation, there are less decks. Tarkared, for example, is almost deceased after the rotation.
Right. In your testing, have you seen any decks like that do punish you? How about the white-blue humans deck or the mono-white humans deck, as people kind of been coming out with?
Right. Luckily, Languish is very good against them. That's why we play 4 Languish now. It's actually, Languish is kind of like a life gain spell. In the old days, you could play Painful Truths, but you would need a spot removal on 2, spot removal on 4, and keep them off the board. Now, you're just letting them get creatures out. You're Painful Truths, you're taking damage. They hit you for a bunch, put you at 8 or 9. As long as the Languish on 4 kills everything on the board, then the life loss is going to be pretty low impact on the game. If there's a situation where creatures get more toughness somehow out of the blue, then we're in trouble. But as long as Languish clears the board on 4, then you can. The Painful Truth times 4 has not bit me yet.
All right. And of course, Obnixilis here, but the new Planeswalker, Soorani, the Grim Nemesis here. Seen this popping up in the Roanoke Black-White deck. You also have it in this deck. It looks very good.
So good. I couldn't believe it. I thought that when you see it first, 6 mana, you have to avoid this kind of mindset when you're building a deck or playing the game. You have to avoid that it's worse than Elspeth or worse than Jace the Mind Sculptor. Of course it is, right? I mean, we're in the multiverse, right?
Yeah.
Those are gone. They're dead, okay? And now we have new cards. And in this format, going control style cards and then playing another way to kill a Planeswalker, gain a ton of life. I mean, it comes down to gains 5 life. I played very poorly, as one of the mistakes I made today is I could have played it and gained 5 life, and I just didn't see that line to take exactly enough to go to 2, and that would have actually probably won me the game. 6 life from 1 card. I mean, that's something we dream of, right? In the control deck, we just want to gain a ton of life. So Soorani does it all. It is a win condition, it draws cards, it removes creatures off the board, and of course, if you ultimate, you win the game.
Right. As any good Planeswalker should do.
Right.
All right. So we got new cards making appearances, looking very good. Let's move to the sideboard here. Dark Petition stands out, but you have a bunch of little targets for this in your deck. Go over them. We've got Infinite Obliteration, Ruinous Path, Virulent Plague, and then we'll go into some of the other spice in the sideboard.
It's just a card that allows you to play less bad cards. And by bad cards, I mean Virulent Plague is very bad in multiples. Infinite Obliteration, not the greatest against a lot of decks, especially in Dragons. After you name Ojtai in the mirror, you don't want to draw anymore. It's just a better way to play more of cards that you don't want to see multiple copies of. And it also, of course, tutors anything you want. Demonic Tutor Control, historically a good card. Getting you 3 mana makes it exactly that cost. And as long as you have cards that match the mana like 3/3/3, then it does exactly what you want to do on turn 5. It's one of those things I figured out a little too late last season. But as long as Origin's around, you'll see 1 copy of my board from here on out.
Yeah. Playing that extra copy, all the good stuff. Yep. Now, you said the big thing in your sideboard this weekend is Hangerback Walker, a card you don't want in the main deck, but you have a couple in the sideboard, and talk about why.
All right, well, step 1 when you're playing against any deck is they take out all the creature removal, at least 80% of it, right? So they leave in a few things. And they have to, because they can't really interact with Ojtai, and it's a late card. Dragon Lore Silumgar, 6 mana. Jace is the only card to leave a few copies in, but now you have a new Jace. This card has to be answered as a threat. It blocks. It is fantastic in the mirror and against decks that have sacrifice effects. If you play this, then it nerfs all their sacrifice effects, so now your dragons are free to fly, right? And then also, I've even gotten situations where they've cast Clip the Wings, and I kill my Hangerback Walker in response and sack the Thopter. So you have all these cute things you can do, and then late game you play a 4/8 mana, because you have all this, you have more land than any deck that has ever played this card. You tap all your lands late game, you have a 4/4 that turns into 4 flyers, and it's just great. So it's one of those cards that is good in the control deck. Again, what's the worst that's going to happen? They Declaration of Stone it? Okay.
I'll draw a card
you've already heard my
on.
rant on Declaration of Stone, so I'll draw a card anyway. That's good. Take away your spell and give me a spell. I'll take it every time.
That seems like a good trade for you.
Oh yeah, every time. I'll take it every time.
And just rounding it out, you got some negates, and then Linvala saw very little play last season. Jerry Thompson tried it out in Jeskai Black, but it looks pretty good here. Obviously, gaining some life is what you need there.
Yeah, and like in this deck, we're tap out compared to Jeskai Black, which is much more reactive. So we are reactive from turns 2 to 4, but after that it is just untap, untap, untap. And this is the premier life gain spell. Last round I played against a friend of mine, and he, the same situation came up where he's playing the Green-White Humans deck, and he has out 2 creatures, and I draw this, and I play it, and there's no other spell that rewards you for being behind like Linvala. So it's a good one of. If it was a dragon, we'd play more. You gotta be very picky about your expensive non-dragon spells, because you can never cut, this is very important for the listeners, never cut a dragon after board, or because you just can't, because your other cards depend on 6 dragons, and that is the bare minimum you can run in a deck like this.
Deck's called Esper Dragons.
Yes, sir.
Don't cut your dragons.
Leave them there.
Shaheen, thanks for signing us in.
Yep.
It's very informative here to know that Control is still alive and well in Shadows over Innistrad Standard. Thanks for joining me here in the sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Baltimore.